My final guest of the afternoon is Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan's 12th District. She serves in House leadership as a co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. She's also vice chair of the Task Force on Aging and Families. I spoke to her just recently. Representative Dingell, thank you so much for joining us. What I really like about the Hill's program today is that it is looking at data from conversations with voters over 50 in America. And you see two things right away, that particularly women over 50, they vote, they're engaged, they participate, but they're also ticked off and they feel unheard, particularly by politicians. Now, I know you are hearing them, but I just want to kind of get a sense of where you think this disconnect is, that so many seniors in America are being unheard, and what do we do to turn that around? What do people that you deal with on the Hill need to hear?
Well, Steve, first, thank you for having me with you. And it's always good to be here for a blunt and honest discussion. I'm hearing two things. You were talking about women. So there are two issues that are on women's minds. But we make a mistake of Democrats if we try to become a single issue party. And I'm certainly not, nor many of the people that I am working with. And yes, choice is a real issue. Roe angered people, women 50 and older. My generation can't believe that we're going backwards. That there are things that we have fought for all of our life that are suddenly challenged, being challenged. But the other issue, and this is a major issue, and I can't decide which issue is going to, I don't believe Michigan, for instance, has broken yet. People are worried about the economy. They're worried about the cost that they're paying at the grocery store. They're worried about the cost of gasoline, and the economy worries them. So I think there are two issues that are really impacting how people are going to vote in November.
So you mentioned what things are costing. So inflation being out there. I think when you poll and you kind of look at this data, people are struggling to pay the bills. They have to make decisions oftentimes about their drugs and healthcare, about their rent, about various issues like this. And these are huge issues. And, it's not like Congress can just snap its fingers and solve them all. Another issues which the Republicans have been raising a lot is crime. But I'd just like to get a sense from you. I mean, you've been a representative for Michigan for a long time, kind of doing this. What do you think are some of the most important things that your party needs to put forward in terms of dealing with those struggles that people are having?
So I think there are a lot of issues, and I think seniors in particular are struggling with many of them. Let me start with healthcare. You're right. They're worried about whether they can afford to go to the doctor, and they're very worried about their medicine. But I'm very clear when I talk to people that we actually did do something in the Congress to address. We've capped the cost of insulin at $35 per month, and that is for anybody that's on Medicare. I want to be really clear that Republicans stripped from that bill a provision that would have capped the cost of insulin for people on private insurance as well. And I just think that's wrong. We have put a cap on the amount of money that seniors are going to have to pay out of pocket at $2,000 a year. Republicans voted against that. We are now going to have Medicare be able to negotiate the cost of some of the most expensive and most used drugs that everybody is using. Republicans voted against that. So when you talk about what people are doing to help people every single day, those are very significant costs. I'm also the sponsor. Bob Casey is the sponsor on the Senate side. Seniors are really being hit by caregiving. There was a very important article in the Washington Post, I think, in the last couple of weeks that talked about what was happening to caregivers. I was a caregiver, but I was not as old as many caregivers are right now in relationships that matter. I was a caregiver for my husband, and that taught me how hard it is to find a caregiver, be able to get more people to go into caregiving. This is going to become a crisis in this country, and pay them a decent wage. And the article in the Post this week highlighted a woman that's been taking care of her husband, but her exhaustion, her inability to be able to find anybody. I think caregiving for people over 50 they're becoming the sandwich generation. They're taking care of their grandchildren and they're taking care of their spouses. It was in my instance. Now I'm taking care of my mother and being able to find the help that you need to get that respite break. And many people want to stay in their own homes. There's a waiting list of more than 1 million people. We need to expand home and community-based care.
I'm going to ask you a question out of left field on this, because as I listen to you, I can feel the stress that you felt, being so responsible, for your husband, John Dingell's health and whatnot. But so many people in the country are feeling this right now. I had dinner recently with Senator Dan Sullivan, a Republican from Alaska, and he said something very surprising. I thought we were going to talk about oil and energy. We ended up talking about the loneliness epidemic in America and mental health stress and challenges, the rise in suicides, particularly among young women. And I guess as we're talking about folks over 50 and their role there, it just kind of all adds up. Are we an empathetic society enough? Are we a human society? Are we missing the action when it comes to helping people be people? Do you know what I'm kind of asking? Because sometimes we deal with these topics in such a sterile way. So
I don't deal with it in a sterile way, as you know. And I want to first say that I was luckier than 99 and 9/10 of the people in this country. I had a support system, but the days when I was very lucky. My husband lived for 4 years and his brain was there every single second. He was twittering his original thoughts the day that he died. But when I was just trying to when he was in the hospital and I needed care and who was going to be the payer of it? Was it private insurance or Medicare? And I would dial endlessly and push buttons and never get a human being. And I was so desperate. I wanted to punch the wall out. And I finally called my congresswoman. I was trying to stay in the system, but 100 calls later, I ended up calling Liaison on the Hill because I couldn't get anybody to help me. Who was the primary payer? And then you learn how broken the system is, how you can't navigate it. Like after you've been in the hospital the way he was, you have 90 days. And after those 90 days, you have real trouble. And people are desperate. They are scary. And we've got to do something to help people. And by the way, but I also think I say to everybody during the pandemic, every day I tell people, think about a little act of kindness because it just helps people. People need somebody to know that they care. And the littlest thing that somebody might do might make all the difference in somebody's day. And we do need to have compassion. And you asked too many subjects there. Mental health is a crisis in this country. Before the pandemic, it was. We don't put resources in. We don't have enough providers. People can't find some place to go. I'm very open. My sister died of a drug overdose, suicide. Yeah. And I know other families are, and I talk about it because it happens in every family. And again, have you ever tried to make the system work? When I was trying to make the system work then, it was you couldn't help somebody that you wanted to help if they didn't want the help.
Right. I did combine a lot of topics in there because there's just a lot of human challenges right now and want to make sure some of them are very connected. You tweeted out, Debbie Dingell, the commitment we made now, the Social Security beneficiaries are going to receive an increase of 8.7% in their benefits in 2023. You said it's $140 a month for approximately 70 million Americans. This is the biggest jump in Social Security outlays I've ever heard of in my life. Now, a lot of people will say, well, this is just helping us to stay in place. I'd say, well, it's better than falling back because of inflation on this. But how is that playing out among your friends? Is there, in your colleagues and in both sides of the aisle, is there support for it? Because we often see this debate as well about the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund and Republican efforts. Senator, a couple of senators have been out there saying, hey, we ought to be renewing this every year and debating it every year, not leaving it as an entitlement. What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to be very clear. People do say, will Social Security be there? It will be there because it is the most critical part of a three-footed stool to make sure. I believe every senior has the right to retire with a safe and secure and in dignity retirement. And they've worked hard. Many have pensions that are now disappearing. Social Security is a very important part of that. And it has not been holding its own. It has not been keeping up with the cost of living. And I would urge anybody that's talking to me to go out and talk to seniors every single day. I go into senior centers every week. I try to talk to seniors, hear what the issues are. They're scared. They really are. This is not a talking point. They are making decisions between food on their table and whether they can afford the medicine they need and where they're going to live. And if they can, what kind of setting are they going to live in? Affordable housing is disappearing, and they do need that helping hand. And I want to be really clear. There are Republicans, the chair of the Democratic Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, who thinks we need to privatize it. We need to eliminate it. We will fight heart and soul. Social Security is now part of the fabric of our society. Seniors depend on it, and they will never let it disappear. And we will work hard to keep it healthy and make sure seniors have that ability to live with a safe and secure retirement.
Thank you for that. One of the things that you brought up earlier in our conversation is the reversal of the Roe v. Wade decision, the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court. And I guess for women over 50, and you said that many women are worried about going backwards in time. What are the other areas out there besides abortion that women are afraid of losing ground on?
Well, Steve, we're still not being paid with parity. That's a reality. I'm going to tell you, I'm not old, I'm seasoned. Okay, I will admit that at this point in my life, but I got a lot more
seasoned.
women.
I'm getting seasoned too, Debbie. I'm getting seasoned.
But I have a lot more vim and vigor in me. And, the fact, one, we don't have pay parity. But, when I said that, it was not that long ago that when I applied for my job at General Motors, where I worked for 3 decades, I was asked, why would a woman want to work at GM? Mary Barra is now that CEO. But you are seeing questions asked now about sexual harassment in the workplace. If I could tell you about some of the things that happened to me, these are not stories made up. I had a man that was my boss who aggressively pursued me and told me if I didn't sleep with him, that he was going to demote. Only bad appraisal I ever had. And when I went to people for help, was told people on the 14th floor, which was the top management floor, like him, live with it or leave. I mean, we cannot go back to those days. I mean, we got to make sure everybody is treated with honesty and respect, and men need to not be worried about being attacked, but they need to treat everybody openly and honestly. We have a Supreme Court justice who said we need to revisit a lot of subjects. When I was at my undergraduate days, student health wasn't allowed. I think every person needs to make their own decision, but I had very serious endometriosis. Hormonal pills, birth control were a form of treating it, but the student health center wasn't allowed to dispense it. We are now threatening what medicines women are going to be able to take again. We had to fight to get parity with NIH, what the amount of money that NIH was spending on research, but no women were included. We still don't have parity in drug testing not on whether you're taking drugs, but research that's being done on drugs and how they impact a woman's body. The Supreme Court justice also said we should visit the subject of equality marriage again. I mean, there's so many subjects that are now could be rolled back. We need to keep moving forward, not going back. I worked hard my whole life to bring equality for women in so many places. And I will not, at this point, when we're still making progress, going to see that progress go back. And that's what we're fighting for.
That's so important. If we may, I have one question from the audience that I'd like to slip in here. It's a question from Eileen Schleff, president of the Creative Alliance Communications. And she asked, how do we, and I assume this is we as she being a Democrat, improve the current messaging and add new distribution channels about all the issues that face women? So I guess Eileen's question is really about what do we need to do? What do Democrats need to do, I should say, above and beyond what you're doing now as far as messaging?
So I would actually say, I don't look at this as a partisan message. I encourage people to talk about the issues that impact all of us and the issues that we care about. I'm worried right now. I remember how angry everybody was. Nobody thought that they could overturn Roe. And then when they did overturn Roe, and by the way, I believe that's an individual's right to choose. What I would decide as a Catholic woman, especially one of my age, would be very different than a young person might do. But there is a separation of church and state. And that's one of the most fundamental principles that our country is founded on. We need to, as women, we need to talk to other women and talk about, if you're women of a certain age like us, we need to talk about what our real world experiences were like. When I'm out talking at rallies or talking to people, there are generational differences. Young women can't believe anybody's going to tell them what they can do with their body, what kind of medicine that they can take. They can't believe anybody can have this much control over their own personal decisions. Well, we fought for those. We believe it because we know we lived it. Women of our generation need to share with people the stories that I talk about. When I interviewed for that job, what happened to me early on in the workplace, the kind of power that a man could have over where my job might go, or the promotions that I might get. We need to remind people of the progress we've worked for. And we need to get that passion and that enthusiasm again about what we've worked for, and make sure that people that are elected to policy roles don't take us backwards, but are focused on moving forward. And I want policymakers, I don't care what party they are, that are going to look forward, but I don't want policymakers going to take us backwards. And while I am a Democrat and I want to see us keep the House, and the president made it clear this week that if we have control of the House and Senate, he will codify Roe versus Wade. I think we need to be talking substance. People need to understand what is at stake.
Well, I just want to thank you for your candor. It's refreshing and very appreciated. Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and it was good to be with you.
And that brings us to the end of our program today. Thank you again to our sponsor, AARP, for its support of this program, and a big thank you to all of you for watching. For those of you who missed any of the conversations this afternoon, we will have the video from the event on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.